Oh, the humanity. It's breaking news. The one they called Johnny Herbert, no longer will he be a steward for 2025. The FIA have announced it. Let's talk to it. But this is a breaking news piece. 3 articles we'll cite. One from Autosport, the Express and the Independent. Ever so slightly different takes on it. Autosport say the FIA has announced that the former F1 driver Johnny Herbert will no longer act as a steward for Grand Prix racing events, notwithstanding the fact that he'd not long been announced that he was going to be stewarding the Australian Grand Prix, first race of the 2025 season. Autosport continues. The British driver has, for many years, formed part of the governing body's pool of ex-professional racing drivers, part-time ones, £300 a day ones, required to act as one of 4 stewards who serve to officiate incidents at F1 events. There's been a significant interest in Herbert's role with the FIA since late 2024, when he was part of the stewards panel that twice penalised Red Bull racing driver Maximilian Verstappen at the Mexican Grand Prix. Tough penalty, some would say so. Justified, some would say so. I would argue, though, as my principal point of contention, that the most controversial bits for Johnny Herbert were the statements after the fact. You are a steward, supposed to be objective, therefore, and impartial, Johnny Herbert. So why every time I turn over a newspaper do I see Johnny Herbert, an official FIA steward, talking about Max Verstappen in less than glowing terms? To have a objective, impartial steward and one that's giving interviews each and every single second to gambling websites, surely those two entities are mutually exclusive. No, hence why I think you find Johnny Herbert no longer a steward, as at 10:50 this morning, the morning of the 29th of the 1st, 2025. Autosport continues. In partnership with a betting company, Herbert then commented on the decision handed down by the body. What are we doing here? We can't do this. This is nonsense. Had to go, Johnny. Love you to death and that. Brilliant driver. Well, half decent one. Very, very brave. Different era and all that. But surely a steward can't be giving interviews so frequently about the drivers that he stewards, by the way, adjudicates over, to gambling websites. We're not rappers, remember. We don't indulge in this sort of activity, remember, said Mohammed Ben Sulayem, head of the FIA. In a statement released on Wednesday, this morning, not long ago, 20 minutes, the FIA said, "It is with regret that we announce today that Johnny Herbert will no longer fulfill the position of F1 driver steward for the FIA. Johnny is widely respected," continues the FIA statement, "and brought invaluable experience and expertise to this role. However, after discussion, it was mutually agreed that his duties as an FIA steward and that of media pundits were incompatible. We thank him for his service and wish him all the best in his future endeavours." Of course they're incompatible, chat. Bye-bye, Johnny, says Outlaw. And not before time, Maximilian Verstappen fans will be saying. The Express have this to say. Archie Griggs, for the avoidance of doubt, all F1 journalistic publications are equal, created equal, but some are more equal than others. Archie's not one of the bad ones. FIA removed Johnny Herbert as FIA steward, F1 steward, months after Max Verstappen rowed. The FIA have parted ways with Johnny Herbert ahead of the 2025 season, notwithstanding the fact that he was due to steward the first Grand Prix. For crying out loud. The FIA have confirmed that Johnny Herbert will no longer serve on its panel of Grand Prix stewards. By the way, there's only a panel of... the panel's not big, eh? They have themselves a problem on their hands. Johnny Herbert was one of the... Okay, you can talk about his off-the-track endeavours, but he had the expertise. No. I mean, who are they going to put in his stead? Herbert had been regular steward, serving over the past 15 years, but has drawn criticism for his media comments over the last few months. He's given interviews to betting companies who have offered his quotes to media in exchange for promotional links. This is commercial now, Johnny. You can't be making money on the side from being a steward and a media pundit. I say again, for the avoidance of doubt, these two things are mutually exclusive. They have to be, if indeed true value objectivity, instituting for the rules and regs in a way that's consistent across all related parties is a thing, a central tenet has given interviews for betting companies who have offered his quotes to media in exchange for promotional links, such as when he rubbed Max Verstappen up the wrong way after last season's Mexican Grand Prix. In a statement, the FIA explained it is with regret, blah, blah, blah. Johnny is widely respected. We thank him for his services. Herbert sparked a row with Verstappen after the Dutchman was handed 2 penalty points for clashing with Lando Norris in Mexican Grand Prix. He accused the Red Bull driver of having a horrible mindset. You are a steward, not a pundit now, and surely you can't wade in both of those waters simultaneously, and therein lies the problem for Johnny Herbert. He was accused by Red Bull driver of having a horrible mindset and urged him to turn down his aggressive. Johnny Herbert accused Max Verstappen of having a horrible mindset. Verstappen's driving style, quote, was harsh, especially when he's taking a fellow driver off track, said Herbert. It's absolutely a no-no for me. Current drivers, former drivers and stewards, I'm a big fan of Max Verstappen, and it frustrates me massively when he drives the way he did in Mexico. He doesn't need to do it. He's good in the cockpit, and at this point in the championship, he just needs to stay. It's too much, isn't it, Johnny? When I read back this stuff, I'm like, Johnny, you can't just shut your mouth for a little bit at least and play the stewardship game. Johnny Herbert's problem was, I think, that he was too much media pundit, too invested in the commercial value of his stardom. I mean, you got to put that down, right? You can't wear both hats simultaneously, Johnny. When Max Verstappen goes into this horrible mindset of trying to gain an advantage, said Johnny Herbert, one-time steward, one-time F1 driver, by taking a fellow driver off track so Ferrari can get the ones. So he's talking about Abu Dhabi, right? I didn't even know Johnny Herbert said this. That is where Max Verstappen needs to know he doesn't have to do that. Prompted a furious response from Verstappen, who later said, now you know where he stands. It's pretty abnormal for him to say this, right? People act like I'm going to do it on purpose, but they can't see inside my head, said Max. They are pretty extreme accusations. Yes, we raced hard, that's right. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Verstappen also suggested that he was being unfairly treated by certain sections of the media / stewards by saying, I know a lot of the people are biased and that I have the wrong passport. I'm very happy with my passport. Mind you, in this paddock, it's the wrong one. I know how most people are. Last year, almost everything went perfectly, said Max Verstappen. It must have hurt a lot of people so much that they couldn't say anything negative. Now it's all coming out and they are going ahead full steam. They're just fine, blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, this is chaos. Ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, Johnny Herbert is gone. Independent says much the same thing. And again, this is Kieran Jackson, that former driver, F1 driver, Johnny Herbert was critical of Max Verstappen's driving style at Mexico last year. There'd been beef back and forth. The FIA stated that they can no longer work with Johnny Herbert as his role as far as steward with his role as media pundit. His commercially driven, incentivized role is no longer compatible. Herbert said too many things. Even over the last 7 days, Herbert's been giving statements talking about F1 and specifically Max Verstappen to a gambling website, saying that Michael Schumacher back in the day instituted a very similar, unique, aggressive style of automotive pugilism. That's what Max Verstappen's doing now. How, Johnny Herbert? I would put forth the following supposition. How can Johnny Herbert be a steward and be talking commercially driven statements to gambling websites? You can't be both, right? You can't, as a central tenant, be an independent, impartial F1 steward and then put on your media punditry cap, giving statements for money to gambling websites. For the avoidance of doubt, to reiterate, Johnny Herbert is no longer a steward, notwithstanding the fact that he was due to steward the very first race of the season at Australia. The FIA have said that they can no longer endure that working relationship with Johnny Herbert because of his statements, because of the rancor, because of some of the things that he said about maybe soon to be 5-time champion, one Maximilian Verstappen. Johnny Herbert is gonzo. Many fans around the world will say good riddance, because we need ourselves a stewardship, a base of stewards, full-time ones preferably, but even if they are part-time, ones that are independent and aren't in the media every single day talking about the sport over which they're meant to be adjudicated in a way that's impartial, objective each and every single time. We can't have the stewards per Suge Knight all up in the videos. That's not what we need. We need a steady hand, surely, for the avoidance of doubt. Johnny Herbert, steward, no longer working with the FIA. Sacked, se acabó. Gonzo, kaput. Full stop. Johnny Herbert, new paragraph. What are we doing here?